Hello everyone, I am Surya Teju Bharadwaj. I am a second year student of KL University. I'll be making a series of operating systems design videos which will cover some of the concepts of the operating systems design. So the topic that I'm going to discuss now is Unix file system and system calls for the file system. Uh, this is going to be a very simple concept, not too deep. So let's get started. So we'll be going to see what is an operating system. So an operating system is a system software. So there are many kinds of software such as system software. There are two kinds, application software. So system software is what that helps to build application software. So the best examples of our system software is operating system. So and we build applications on top of an operating system, like let's just consider ms word. MS Word is built on top of an operating system. In the sense, it uses the resources of operating system. So it can be said as an application software. So let's go with the general definition of an operating system. Operating system is a system software that manages computer hardware, software resources, and provides common services for computer programs. We'll be writing programs such as let's just say hello world program or file management program. We'll be using some file pointers and we'll be appending some kind of content to the file. So here we will be using the hardware resources and software resources using the computer programs to get the services. So the popular examples for on operating systems are Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Linux, Android, and so on. There are many other operating systems. So next, the structure of Unix operating system. Unix, so I'll be dividing it as layers. This is layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, and here we'll be having user programs. So layer 1, hardware. As you know, hardware means display, storage devices such as HDDs, SSDs, and so on. And we'll be having peripheral devices such as keyboards, mouse, etc. So the second layer is kernel. Kernel can be said as the heart of an operating system, and we'll be discussing about it later on. So the layer 3 is shell, and the layer 4 is application programs that are built on top of hardware. That are built on top of operating system, and this is a compiler for us and user programs. By with the help of user programs, we'll be accessing some application programs, and we'll be needing some hardware resources. So note that the layers which are given here, a layer can only contact with its bottom layers. So in the sense, kernel can communicate with hardware, shell can communicate with kernel, and application programs will communicate with shell. So that's one kind of explanation. So let's see what is kernel. Kernel is a central module of operating system. It is loaded first and it remains in the main memory. Loaded first in the sense, when we boot our system, the kernel is first loaded into the main memory, and it must be as small as possible, and it provides and must provide all essential services required by other parts of the operating system. So kernel loads into main memory at the time of booting. And kernel code is usually loaded into a protected area of memory to prevent it from being overwritten by other programs and other parts of operating system. Uh, I'll be covering this one somewhat generally. Let's just say I have a notepad, some notepad file name. Uh, let's just say example.txt. I stored, for example, my friend's phone numbers. Let's just say person one, and I stored some number as 124799956. And person two phone number will be some 44239654. I want this to be with me so that I can contact my friend. What if I just forgotten and erase this whole thing and written some to-do list in it? I cannot access this required information, or I cannot just call my friend and I cannot perform my tasks. So kernel, as it is a central module of the operating system and it is required for the operating system to perform any kind of operation, the kernel must be stored in a protected area to ensure that it is not erased by some other program or some other part of operating system. That's a very essential point. So now Unix architecture. The architecture of Unix is like shown in the image. So we'll be writing a set of user programs which will be accessing some well-defined libraries. Let's just consider C library for example, and through that we'll be to be using the kernel resources. We will be using system calls. We'll be seeing what is a system call later on. System calls are just like normal function calls. So we will be calling some system calls through libraries or directly, and we will be accessing several set of subsystems. For one subsystem is file subsystem. File subsystem is responsible for the file system and its operations. So file system communicates with the device drivers by using buffer mechanism. So what is a buffer mechanism? For example, if I want to read something, I will not be reading directly into my variable. I will be first reading it into my buffer. Buffer is nothing but a temporary storage kind of thing to ensure or to improve the speed of access. So for example, let's just I'll give about a very easy example. Uh, as you are very familiar with the recent mobile phone app, whenever we call a person, his for example, I called some P1, and after I called, I will be having a page as recent, and I will be getting I have contacted P1, and if I want to dial him again. So like this, whenever I, for example, a file has some information such as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and whenever I read it, it just comes into my buffer. So file subsystem communicates with block IO device drivers using buffer mechanism, or we can say as buffer caching. And there is also a possibility for file system to communicate directly with device drivers without the need of buffer mechanism. And then we have process control subsystem. Process control subsystem is responsible for inter-process communication, scheduler, and memory management. Inter-process communication in the sense communication between two processes, and scheduler, process scheduling, and memory management as it is self-explanatory. The management of memory. For example, I have 4 MB of primary memory, and my program there are for example 4 programs where program 1 or process 1 needs 2 MB of memory, process 2 needs 2 MB of main memory, and process 3 2 MB, and process 4 also 2 MB. So for fair access or fair running of every program, there will be a swapping mechanism. So I will be loading these two into main memory. I'll be just a minute. Sorry. Yeah. For example, process 1, process 2, process 3, and process 4. I have a total of 4 MB of memory and secondary memory available. Process 1 needs 2 MB of memory. Process 2 needs 2 MB, and process 3 needs 2 MB, and process 4 needs 2 MB. So, uh, to ensure that each and every process gets run, we will be using the swapping mechanism. I will be loading these two into the main memory. So, first, these two gets run. Whenever I'll be showing my main memory as this process 1, process 2. So, whenever my process 1 is complete, then process 3 gets swapped. So, then process 3, process 2. And so, whenever process 2 is completed, I'll be swapping it with process 4, process 3, process 4. So, till then, when these are waiting, and these will be stored in secondary memory. And to ensure that every process is running, whenever a process is completed in the main memory, it gets swapped with another process which is present in the secondary memory. So, so that's the concept of swapping mechanism. I just explained it very briefly. There is a lot more to it, so I'll be covering it later on. So then, what we know is that user programs to access hardware resources uses kernel or uses system calls. So after that we go to hardware control, and using that we'll be controlling the hardware. I'll be giving out an even general example. So um, I'll be showing an example C program hash include stdio.h in main printf hello world return 0. So this is an example program. I hope most of you are familiar with this. So what my output will be is that I'll be getting in the console as hello world. Internally, we will be writing it. We will be writing it onto the screen by using a system called write with file descriptor as 1, comma, and the rest of the parameters such as buffer and number of bytes to read. So that's unrelated for now. So to make a write on the display, we will be having several hundreds of lines of. To avoid that, we need not write hundred lines of code every time we want to display something on the screen. So we will be using a predefined system call, which is internally written in the printf function in the C library to give us the output as display on the screen, which has the message hello world. So let's start with file subsystem. File subsystem manages files, allocates free space, administers free space, control access, retrieve data for users. So file subsystem, we can just imagine what a file system can do. So we have let's generally think we have a file. Most of us will be having some file management applications on our mobiles, and even we have on our desktops or PCs. So we will be managing our files, and we will be making some free space, administering what kind of what amount of free space is available, controlling the access, like we can control this user can control have this access to this file, and the user who cannot have access, and retrieving data for users. So these are operations will be done, but internally the operating system manages all this. So it uses buffer mechanism to interact with block IO device drivers. So as we seen in the previous slide, so device drivers are kernel modules that control operation of peripheral devices. So I will be giving out a general example again. So I'll be giving out more examples as it will make understanding process very easy. So I'll be considering my laptop. So I'll be uh, so this is a brand new laptop, and I'll be connecting my pen drive, let's just say not pen drive, I'll be connecting a keyboard to it. So whenever we connect the keyboard, we will be getting a message says that drivers are being installed. So these are called device drivers. So what these device drivers will help us do is every peripheral device will be having a different word length, different set of operations, and different way of operating, and different ways of response. So uh, device drivers ensure that the common interface is provided to each and every IO device, and the IO device is well functioned, and block IO devices are nothing but random access storage devices. Sorry. So process control and hardware control. These are the other subsystems which we have seen. So the process control subsystem is responsible for process synchronization and inter-process communication, memory management, and process scheduling. Hardware control. Hardware control is responsible for handling interrupts and communicating with the machine. I'll be briefly explaining what is an interrupt. So interrupt. So I'll be taking a general example again. Uh, Say I'm watching TV. Uh, I am watching television, and I have a mobile here. So when I'm watching, I get a ring around here from the mobile, and I have to attend the call. So what I do, my current task is that I am watching a TV. I interrupt this task, and then I go answer my mobile. So I answer my mobile, and after task is complete, that is after I completed speaking on my mobile, I return to watch the TV again. So resume the previous process. So this is what interrupt means. I get interrupted from my running task, and the interrupt is handled, and I return to the task which I have paused, or I can say I will resume the task which has been interrupted. Yeah. So next, system calls. As we have said, to access a kernel resources, we will be using a set of well-defined system calls. So system call is a normal function call. So it's nothing different. For example, if I want to read a file, I'll be saying as read a file descriptor comma buffer comma number of bytes. It just looks like a system a normal function call which I pass it some parameters. So the usual calling sequence cannot change the mode of process from user to kernel. Here arises another concept, the mode of operation. One is user mode and another is kernel mode. User mode can only perform user level operations, and kernel mode can perform both user and kernel level operations. So user will not be having all the permissions required, but kernel can do anything with the hardware. So for user mode, that is user programs, to use the kernel resources, we will be using system calls to access kernel. So I'll be showing it in detail. User programs access kernel resources uses system calls. System calls will be helping us use kernel resources. The C compiler uses a predefined library of functions that have the names of system calls, thus resolving the system call references in the user program. I'll be having a system call named open. This system call will be internally declared as sys underscore open. Whenever I use this system calls, this will be calling the sys underscore open. So it helps us access kernel space operations in our program, as we have said, kernel to use the kernel resources. So next, file system. Unix uses hierarchical file system. See, as you can see, just like this. Actually, this is very broken down. I will be showing a detailed diagram of it. So, at the initial directory of operating system is root, represented as slash. Root will be having a set of other directories. Let's just say, for example, D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, D6, and D1, D2, D3 will be having say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and let's just say A will be having Z, Y, X, K, X, K, T, K, L. So for me, this is, we can say this is as a tree-like structure. Tree-like structure, and this is root, represented as slash. It has directories. So all my files are organized into directories. This is a directory, this is a directory, and these all are directories. And let's just say these are my files. So my files are organized into directories, and we can also say that directories are organized into directories, and all of the directories are organized in a tree-like manner. So this is what is called hierarchical file system. Next, structure of a file system. So every file system will be having a boot block, super block, inode list, and data blocks. Boot block has a bootstrap code. So it is the boot code, when the code which must be run when the system is being turned on, which is required to boot the system, and every file system has a boot block. So we can even say that an operating system may have one or more file system. Superblock maintains the size of file system, number of files it can store, and where to find a free space. And we can even say it as free list. Inode list, free space is managed by free list, and superblock will be having size, number of files, and where to find free space or the free list. Inode list. Inode list has the list of inodes in the file system. Inode can be said as inode, or is short for index node. Inode is short for index node, and every file will be having a unique inode, which are static. Mean in the sense they cannot be changed in value. of or the identification number. Data block start at the end of inode list and contain file data and administrative data. So that's pretty much explanatory. And next, internal representation of files. In Unix, every file has a unique inode. Process interacts with files using a set of system calls, as we say. Uh, uh, my executing program is a process, and to access files, I'll be using a set of system calls such as open, close, read, write, pipe, and there will be link, unlink, etc. Inodes exist in static form, as I have told just now, and on it will be in disk, and kernel reads them into main memory and modifies them. Kernel will be reading these inodes into main memory, and it will be making changes to it, and later on updating it in the superblock and the rest of the file system. And this main memory loaded inode list is inodes are known as in-core inodes. Write it down. In-core inode. Inode consists of information such as disk layout, file owner, access permissions, and access types. File owner, the person who created the file, creator of file, access permissions, or which users can access, and when is it access, is access types. So it's very pretty clear. File data structures in kernel. Sorry. So we will be having a total of 3 data structures for files. 1. User file descriptor table. 2. File table. 3 will be inode table. So kernel contains some other data structures other than the inode table. So they are user file descriptor table and file table. User file descriptor table is a per process data structure. Note that user file descriptor table is a per process data structure, meaning that for every process there will be a user file descriptor table. And I'll be giving out a note point here. For the file descriptor value 0, it is for standard input. File descriptor 1 stands for standard output. File descriptor 2 stands for standard error. Remaining all we can use for our user file descriptors. So per process data structure, for my every process a user file descriptor table is separate, or you can say it is created for one user file descriptor table is created for every process, and file table is global, meaning that it is common to all the processes. When a process opens or creates a file, the kernel allocates an entry in each table corresponding to the inode. These 3 tables maintain the state of the file. So file table keeps track of byte offset. You'll be getting a doubt as what is byte offset. I'll be giving a general example, but I don't think that that's not the whole concept of it. For understanding purpose, I'll be giving one. My bytes in the data blocks are such as 1457, 1458, 1459, 1460, and so on. So my file starts from 1457. So with respect to this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. Here then my 1457 is offset. So whenever I add my index to this offset, I'll be getting that particular block or byte, or that particular location, I can say. So 1457 plus 0, which is 1457. I'll be getting this, and I can read the data from it. Then 1457 plus 1, 1458. I'll be getting this. I'll get the data from this, or I can write into it. 1457 plus 2 and so on. So yeah, so that's what's the meaning of byte offset. And user file descriptor table points to file table entry. So we can use file descriptor for several other purposes. Other purposes in the sense, we can change the output streams, uh, output or input streams into a file. So I'll be this is, let's just say this is my user file descriptor table. I have my let's just say 3 is my value. It points to some f1, f2, f3, f4. So I made it point to my user f4, which will be having all the details regarding f4, such as access rights, offset, and also next location where read or write can takes place. I think that's the whole thing. So next, the file system calls bmap, name, open, close, read, write, create, mknode. So next, vmap algorithm. So I'll be saying on the vmap algorithm. So vmap is used to convert the physical obtain the physical block number from the logical block number. So calculate. So let's just start. So calculate the logical block number in file from byte offset. We'll be calculating the logical block number from the byte offset. As I have explained what byte offset is. So next, calculate start byte from in block for IO. We'll be calculating the start byte. Next, calculate the number of bytes to copy to user and check if read ahead is applicable and determine level of indirection. Yeah, so I'll be covering these points now. So my file's byte offset is let's just say 2005. From that, my logical block number, so the blocks will be continuing as 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, and so on. So from with respect to this, I will be having a 0, as I have discussed what is logical block and 3. And so this is my logical block number, which is calculated. I will have my file block here. For example, this is the block I want. Read ahead in the sense I can create a reference for another block in case my space is not sufficient, and I can store the remaining data in here, and if that is also not sufficient, I can create another reference for another block and I can connect with here and store the data. This is what redirection means. Read ahead is applicable in the sense I'll be reading the indirect blocks. So determine the level of indirection in the sense how many indirect levels should I go to, while not necessary level of indirection. So I have whenever the level of indirection in the sense how many levels I should process till that is not reached, I have to calculate the index to inode or indirect block. I have to calculate my index. I will be having the index, which is the logical number into inode. So every block or every file will be having a unique inode or indirect block number from logical block number in file. Get disk block number from inode or indirect block. I'll be getting the disk block number, and if there is any, as I have said, buffer mechanism, you have to release buffer from previous discrete. So if I read a block, I have to release it so that next block can be read and there is no wastage of memory. and using the B release algorithm. And if no levels of indirection, so I have reached the final block. I went here, and here is something, and I have pointed this to another block. So this is my final level, and there is no level of indirection. I will be returning this block number. Sorry, I'll be uh, I'll be returning block number. And read indirect disk block. So I'll be reading that if not so, this is not happened, I'll be reading the indirect disk block for next level of indirection. So if this is not the last block, I have some other point, some other block pointed, I should read this. Or if I say I have here, there is indirection and not final block, I went, I'll read this, and here I'll be going on here. So whenever I reach to the end, I'll be returning. If not so, I should read the indirect block and adjust the logical block number according to the level of indirection. And so on, it will be running till we reach the final indirect block. So I'll be going with the name algorithm. Name algorithm is pretty much easy and general. So use it to convert path of a file to inode number. So I'll be giving out a path such as a slash a slash b slash c. So I should be getting the inode of C by using the name algorithm. Kernel parses the whole path and finally returns the inode of the given file, and chdir is to change from directory to directory. So I'll just start with it. If path name starts from root, so the path is somewhat slash a slash b slash c. This is my root. So my working inode will be root inode. Else current directory inode. For example, if my path is just slash a slash b slash c, I will be using my current directory. So I'll be showing up an example after I just discuss this algorithm. While there is more path name, so I must parse through the whole path, read next path, and name next path name component from input. So slash is read, and next is a. Verify that the working inode is of a directory and access permissions are okay. So must be a directory, and there are access permissions for me to access a. Next, if working inode is root and component is dot. Here there is one more point that I need to cover. Every directory has two other directories pointed in them. One is dot, another is dot. This represents present directory. This represents previous directory or parent directory. Read directory. So if working inode is of root and component is dot, then we must continue. So there isn't a possibility for me to go above the root. So root is my initial. So there is no point in me saying that dot is there and I should go to the previous of root. There will be no directory. So I will be continuing it. I will be going to the next one. So read directory by repeated use of algorithms bmap, bread, and brelease. So we'll be reading the next one. So we'll be searching for the next component, and if the component matches an entry in the directory, so so I finally found my next one. Get inode of the matched component and release working inode. So working inode will be released, and we'll be setting the working inode to inode of matched component, and or else we'll be returning no inode if it is an invalid path. At the end we'll be returning the working inode. I'll be showing the example properly here. So I'll be giving out two examples. Example one slash a slash b slash c. So I have to get the inode of c here. So root. Let's just say I'll be having some L1 A B C. Root is my initial directory. So I'll be keeping my working component here. and I'll be searching all the directories present in it. So I have L1. This is not equals to A. Yeah, it is matched. So I transfer my working inode. I release this and transfer my working component. I'll assign my working component to this. And A has some other directories such as Z, K, P, D, and Z has some C and also some L, some P, W, C, R. So next I'll be searching A for B. Z, it is not B. K, not B. B, match the component. Release and working component will be this. So next, similarly, I will be searching for C here, not C. C found, working inode, and there is no path here. I have reached. So this is slash. Here it will be slash A. Here it will be slash A slash B, and here it will be slash A slash B slash C. So my whole path is parsed now. There is no more path remaining. So I'll be returning the inode of C. This is my name algorithm. I hope it is clear to all of you. Next, how to perform operations on files. So till now we have seen passing of path and bmap. Now let's see create, open, close, mknode. Let's see open system call. What is open what is open system call does is it allocates file table entry and file descriptor table entry to allow operations on files. As system call is nothing but a function, it must return a value. Open, create, return the file descriptor value of the opened file, and in case of any error it returns a negative value which is -1. So next, open algorithm. Open, this is pretty much simple. So for what it does is it converts the name or path of the file to inode using the name algorithm. If the file does not exist or access is not permitted, it will return an error. Sorry guys, I just forgot. Give you a second example. Example 2 will be A slash B slash C. So my sorry, it's not A slash B slash C. So my root contains some B, K, L, M. So my K has my program and A has B and Z. B has C. This is C. So so as there is the first component is not root, my present directory will be this. So I'll be searching K in K for A. A is found. Next, from A will be working. This will be the working inode. From this A, this gets released, and as A is found, we get A as working, and from that B, and from that C. Similar to what I have told before, but the only difference is present directory will be the working inode if the initial path is not root. So I just explained it briefly. So if the file does not exist or access is not permitted, we'll return an error as we cannot open the file. Allocate file table entry for inode, initialize count and offset, byte count. So number of bytes and or yeah, the number of bytes and offset. So allocate user file descriptor table entry and set pointer to the file table entry. If the type of file or type of open specifies truncate file, free all the blocks. That means the content of the file will be removed. Unlock inode. So we are done with the inode, so we will be unlocking it and return the user file descriptor of the file. It's pretty much simple. So now create algorithm. Create, it takes the input of file name, permissions and file descriptor. So this is pretty much similar to open algorithm. Similar to open algorithm, create also returns the user file descriptor value of the created file. uh, so first step, get inode for the file using name my algorithm. And if the file already exists and if it does not permit access, release the inode and return error. If the file does not exist, assign a free inode from the file system using the ILOC algorithm. So as I have discussed before, every file system will be having inode list with free inode list. From that, we will be getting an inode and assigning it to the new file, and we will be creating a new directory entry in the parent directory. Include the new file name and newly assigned inode number. So allocate file table entry for inode, initialize the count. We'll be allocating the file table entry as we created a new file. If the file existed at the time of create, free all the blocks. And at last, unlock the inode and return the user file descriptor. So I'll be explaining what happens here. So I had to create a file named zap.txt. For example, my present directory is somewhere around here, and my program is here. See, and my zap.txt will be here. Will be created by getting a free inode from the inode list and the name which I specified. The format will be create of file descriptor. File descriptor, file name, comma flags. So it returns a user file descriptor. So whenever I created this file, I will be getting the file descriptor of zap.txt. So yeah, so mknode is taking the input of path name, file type, permissions, major minus device numbers for block and special characters. So if new node is not named pipe and user not is super user, we must return an error. Get the inode of parent of new node. So to create a file, we must get the inode of parent directory, that is its previous directory, that is the directory in which our program is running. If or the previous directory of the path, if new node already exists, release parent inode and return error. That means if the file is already exists, then we will be returning the error by and releasing the parent inode. Assign free inode from the file system of new node. So as I have discussed before, the free node will be obtained from the free list of file system, free inode list of the file system, and we'll be creating a new directory entry in parent directory with new node name and new inode number, which will be mentioned in mknode system call, and release the parents directory as we have created. There is no need for us with the parent directory, so we'll be releasing it. If new node is block or special character special file, write major minor numbers into inode structure. So we'll be modifying the inode structure there, and we'll be releasing new node inode using the IPUT algorithm. So this is the mknode algorithm. So I think it's pretty much clear. So thank you guys. Hope you all had fun learning. Uh, Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.